be a hindrance. You're supposed to kind of raise yourself back up into the afterlife. One of the fun things, I don't know how fun it is, but issues we've dealt with in the tomb of Senebkai. It's kind of a cliche, of course. Vipers, snakes in the tomb of a pharaoh, but in fact it happens. If you go back to these texts, one of the interesting things you find on these inscriptions in Senebkai's tomb is something called truncated hieroglyphs, where they cut off the bodies of creatures, birds and various kinds of animals. And here we see little snake hieroglyphs, the F or viper hieroglyph. And you notice they've been cut in half. They don't have their tails. But in the process of digging the tomb, it turned out it's been a place where horned vipers like to come. And we've had quite a number that have appeared in the burial chamber. There you see one of them. There was a time this summer we had the tomb open, and one morning we came out and there was a huge one in there. And this workman, luckily, who's quite skilled in killing snakes, took care of it. It was a giant horned viper. Normally they're about a foot long. You can see this one's about 3 feet in length. We dispatched that one. The next morning we came back and there was another one in the chamber again. So the Egyptians would truncate their hieroglyphs to try to control these kind of threatening creatures like vipers. And now we know the reason. They're trying to infest the burial chamber of Senebkai. Just some of the other decoration in the tomb I don't have time to talk about. There's my wife Jen working on one of the aspects of this tomb that's very informative is that Senebkai's architects, who probably built this tomb very rapidly after his death, which seems to have happened in battle, as I'll show you, they built it very quickly out of reused materials, including a lot of blocks that they simply ripped off out of preceding monuments. So there she is documenting that. A lot of questions about who this king is and the history of the era. I won't go into details on it, but there's a lot of issues of interpretation of his name and the historical period. But the excavations have increasingly kind of demonstrated to us the existence of a group of sort of minor pharaohs, regional pharaohs, probably rulers of a regional kingdom that we can call tentatively the Abydos dynasty, who were using this place as their necropolis, adding their tombs in the shadow of the great tombs of the Middle Kingdom. And one of the very informative aspects of the discovery of Senebkai is the actual discovery of his body. Many of these tombs do not contain the bodies of the kings. These were torn apart and destroyed thousands of years ago by tomb robbers. But fortunately, Senebkai's tomb contained remains of his actual burial assemblage, including his wooden canopic chest, which you see here, remains of his funerary mask and parts of his painted coffin, as well as the king's body, which is strewn in this chamber here, left there by tomb robbers. So there you see we recovered most of the body of Senebkai. He was once upon a time mummified, but the body was torn apart and has suffered a lot of damage, and has been reduced to skeletal remains, but there are remains of wrappings that indicate that he was mummified. Of course, a lot of interest occurred when we discovered the body of Senebkai, including something that had never occurred to me when this picture was circulated via the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities. Of course, there's lots of people on the internet that suddenly had this image of the skeleton of Senebkai at their disposal. And here's some wise commentators that noticed something that had never occurred to me. The first comment being, anyone else wonder why in the second last pic the left index finger looks so long? And someone responds, well, there are bones missing from all the other fingers. Of course, the response is, okay, thanks, you're right, and it looks to me to be the same case for his left foot also. The discussion then takes a rather strange turn. It was either that or confirmation of alien influence in pyramid building, or the owner was a proctologist in life, ? And he kicked with his left. Soccer might be older than previously thought. So this is the wisdom that the internet contributes to archaeological interpretation. This skeleton has turned out to be incredibly informative, and we're still kind of working through the data. We've retrieved a number of bodies, including Senebkai. We're able to do tentative reconstructions, facial reconstructions, giving you a sense of what they may have looked like on the basis of the skulls. In the case of Senebkai, the most significant and intriguing evidence is clear indications that he did not die of natural causes, but in fact died rather brutally in battle. He's covered from the top of his head to his toes in about 20 different major wounds, including major axe wounds, cuts to his skull. His hands bear axe marks as well, and the lower parts of his body as well suffered cut marks. You can see some of this trauma. He died in rather dire circumstances, probably on the battlefield in a way comparable to this very famous example of a pharaoh of the Second Intermediate Period, a little bit later in time, the Theban king of the 17th dynasty, Seqenen Tao. We know he also died in battle, bearing these axe wounds in his skull. Senebkai is a precursor to that, an indication of the warfare and conflict that characterized the Second Intermediate Period, and we're still analyzing and interpreting the evidence of his death in battle, but it seems he probably was returned to Abydos from somewhere quite distant. He was mummified to a certain extent. There's indications that he may have his body was already decomposing at the point it was treated for burial. And probably his very rapidly built tomb was assembled out of reused blocks. And so it's a modest tomb. It's one prepared sort of at the last minute for a king who's struggling in this era of the Second Intermediate Period, for some reason has entered into a conflict and died in battle, but has returned to Anubis mountain to be buried. So anyway, many issues still to work out, just the territory of the possible Abydos dynasty and a view of the restoration work we're doing on his tomb. In future years, if any of you visit Anubis mountain, you may well be able to see the tomb of Senebkai. We've done restoration work to the architecture of the burial chamber and the paintings as well, and there's going to be a cover building that will enclose the whole thing, and you'll be able to enter it. The same with Senwosret III, the big tomb, as well as hopefully the tombs adjacent, the tomb of Sobek-Hotep IV and possibly Neferhotep I. So anyway, I've taken a little longer than I meant to, but that's my last slide. Thank you all. If we have time for questions, I'd be happy to take them.